I'm Matt Bouchard here in New York City for REIT Week 2019, REITs Investor Conference. Joining me today is Bayle Smith, Vice President, Advisory and Consulting with Green Street Advisors. Bayle, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Effective investor communication is a core competency for top-performing REITs, but quality disclosure and storytelling is not always a given in the REIT industry. What are the most common themes for those REITs that do struggle to communicate effectively with their investors?
Well, effective investor communication should be a core competency for any REIT. And from Green Street's perspective, we like to see three main things come through in their story. The first is strategic vision. The second is competitive advantage. And the third is capital allocation philosophy. A lot of REITs struggle with this, and most often it's companies that are new to the public market or companies that have underperformed relative to their peers. For companies that are new to the public market, REIT investors tend to speak a different language than private market investors. And for management teams that don't have as much public market experience, a lot of times they struggle to tell their stories in a way that resonates with REIT investors. For companies that have underperformed relative to their peers, a lot of times we see management teams that focus a little bit too much on individual successes and individual projects, when we would prefer to see them spend more time talking about the company's overall strategy and how that's progressing.
Now, can you talk about some of the most common areas where REITs need to improve?
Green Street has a lot of history in the REIT industry, and that gives us a lot of context and data as to what works best when trying to maximize shareholder value. And when Green Street's advisory group works with a company, generally our work focuses on two key areas. The first is financial disclosure, and you'd be very surprised how often small changes in public disclosure can have a big impact on a company's value. The second is investor materials, particularly investor presentations that management teams use at REIT and other conferences. A lot of times these investor presentations fail to answer all the questions that are on institutional investors' minds.
Now let's talk about financial disclosures in a little more detail. What can a company do to improve on what it already has?
It's great to tout successes, but more often what we like to see is companies that are having an open dialogue with investors as to where the difficulties in a portfolio are. Our goal is to generally make sure that investors have all the tools they need to drive an accurate estimate of value, whether that's the real estate value or the platform value of the company. When Green Street's advisory group works with a team, typically what we'll do is we'll create an independent estimate of NAV using public information, just like our research team would. Then from there, we compare notes with the management team. And anywhere there are differences, those are automatically areas that we look at for potentially adding disclosure or revising disclosure. It can be just as detrimental to have an NAV that's too high as it could be to have an NAV that's too low. So what we're trying to do is narrow the range of opinion within the market so that a company can allocate capital appropriately.
So how does the communication style change between what's shown in a company's disclosure and what shows up in their investor presentations?
So for financial disclosure, oftentimes our solution is to add more detail to a company's documents. But for an investor presentation, oftentimes the opposite is true. So we like to see higher level communication around a company's strategy. And oftentimes that's just putting up clear guideposts as to a company's performance in the coming years. The key is defining those guideposts appropriately. For a company that has traditional assets, an office company, a multifamily company, we like to see an investor presentation focus on just purely the long-term strategy of the company going forward, while the financial documents focus more on what the company is worth today. For a non-traditional company, we more often like to see a management team and financial documents and investor presentations that draw parallels with more traditional companies. A lot of times these niche sectors are new to REIT investors, and they need a little bit more time to get their head around what this business is like relative to more traditional companies.
Bayle, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
For more from REIT Week 2019, be sure to visit REIT's website, REIT.com.